to a special edition of Point Taken. I'm joined today by a very special guest, the Secretary for Justice, Teresa Cheng. Ms. Cheng, thank you so much for joining me today. The Vision 2030 for the Rule of Law, which your department announced last year, it's a 10-year initiative for the promotion and education of the rule of law in Hong Kong. Could you share with us why there was a need for this initiative and what's the primary focus group for it?
Well, we launched this Vision 2030 for rule of law in November last year, in fact at this very room, with a view to promote rule of law in Hong Kong, and of course we hope also to advance our practice of the rule of law. We think there is a need to do that because we feel that in the past few years there was a decline in the people observing the law, and there were certainly some very mistaken and misleading points of views about people should break the law in order to express their views. Those are totally wrong concepts. So we felt we have to promote the proper understanding of the rule of law at various levels. So we have a 3 E's program. E in the sense of engagement, and empowerment, and enrichment. So we try to promote it in the sense of the engagement by reaching out to the general public so that everybody can have a taste and understanding of that, and that we do it by the Studio DOJ. In the empowerment program, we try and reach out to the secondary as well as the primary school students so that they get a chance to understand what is the proper understanding of the rule of law, but importantly, to bring them back into the importance of observing the law, which I think there was a very bad vibe at that, a few years back. So we're doing that, and we're doing a number of projects to achieve that exercise. And in terms of enrichment, we want to provide also for those who are in the legal profession and those more knowledgeable in the area of law, some advancement and angle. And so, for instance, the secondment arrangements that Department of Justice has reached with 3 international organizations are provided for our legal officers as well as the private sector so that they can have the chance to work in international organizations. So that, in a way, is our primary aim of engaging the local community and promoting the rule of law. In another aspect, which is equally important, is that we've set up a task force including very, very respectable experts in this area, judges in the International Court of Justice, in the International Criminal Court, former WTO appellate body judges, who sit on the task force and give us advice on how one should look at the rule of law, and perhaps to how one can review how a particular jurisdiction like Hong Kong should be examining and reviewing our own performance. So in that perspective, we've already looked at 2 angles. One is to use objective data to review and consider how the rule of law is being implemented in a particular place. So in Hong Kong, we've started to do that exercise, and in November this year at the Hong Kong Legal Week, we're going to launch the objective data. The second angle that is relating to the rule of law that we think is also very relevant and perhaps not looked at as much as it should be is the cultural and the social economic development of a particular jurisdiction, because the cultural angle actually affects how one feels that the rule of law is or is not there. And so I think instead of just looking at something very subjective, do you think the law is just, a feeling and a thinking is not good enough, we want some more scientific approach with the objective data. So we're doing, as it were, a local, but also a more broader and more research-based type of approach in promoting the rule of law.
And I believe you're the chairperson of that task force that you mentioned that was set up. And about 450 million Hong Kong dollars has been earmarked for this initiative. So I was wondering, what is the next few steps that are to come?
Thank you. Now, this is a 10-year project, and as I started, it's not going to be turned around very quickly, the misunderstanding of concepts of law. Now, with the study of the objective data, we want to not just benefit Hong Kong, but we hope that by our experience we would be able to share that with people within the region so that they can benefit from looking at how their own rule of law can be reviewed and looked at. And so we are expecting that perhaps with the objective data, we may be able to encourage other people to look at it and exchange views with other jurisdictions so that we, as it were, grow together as well. So we hope to be a very inclusive exercise and therefore not just in Hong Kong, but perhaps regional, and perhaps to raise everybody's interest in looking at the rule of law in a very objective, but also rational and very well-based approach.
That's very interesting, especially the cultural aspect of examining the law. And so the review mechanism for it, you said, is just basically going over the corroborating stats and corroborating data with different regions. Is that the mechanism in place for vetting how the process is going?
We will very much allow the own jurisdiction, because I do not want to sound as if we are taking a lead, but we have the initiative, so we want to share it with our neighboring jurisdictions to see how they can utilize the concepts and the experience we've had in order to develop together our practice of the rule of law. So I think that's an ongoing process. And it's a 10-year program, because one of the idea, in fact, the idea that we started this is of the 2030 agenda of the United Nations for Sustainable Development Goals. That's why we use 2030. 2030 agenda is a very important initiative because of all the various things that is to be done, one of which is to promote the rule of law under their Goal 16. And how do we achieve that? By perhaps encouraging more people to have access to law, to have equality before the law, to ensure that justice is being properly practiced. All these are things which are in line with the United Nations 2030 agenda. So we hope that it's not just Hong Kong, but we're doing that as an initiative that we hope that in the region can all benefit from it.
Mrs. Secretary, thank you so much for taking the time to talk.
Thank you, Azam.